Emma Thompson lived in a small town beside a busy military base. Every morning, she woke to the sound of distant marching boots and the steady hum of helicopters passing overhead. Her house sat at the edge of town, where dusty roads met fields of tall grass. Emma's father, a retired infantryman, often said that this was the place for stories of heroes and sharpshooters. He told her tales of soldiers who could hit a target at 100 yards without blinking. Emma listened with wide eyes and a racing heart. She dreamed of being like those heroes one day. Emma was 8 years old. She had bright brown eyes, a shower of curly hair, and a fearless smile that caught everyone's attention. At school, she was quiet but curious. She loved asking questions about how things worked, especially guns and targets. Whenever her classmates played with dolls or painted pictures, Emma would sketch drawings of rifles or silvery steel silhouettes. She would imagine herself standing at a firing line, breathing in the clean air, and taking aim with perfect focus. Her father noticed her interest early on, kept his old uniform neatly folded in the closet, and an old journal filled with memories of training and missions. One evening, as Emma sat at the kitchen table drawing bullseye targets, her father came in and asked, "What are you working on, kiddo?" Emma looked up and grinned. She held out her paper. "I'm practicing," she said. "When I grow up, I want to be the best shooter in the world." Her father paused for a moment, studying her determined face. He had faced real danger and seen friends hurt in battles, yet he also understood the power of a steady hand and a steady heart. He gently placed his big hand on her shoulder. "If you truly want to learn, I'll teach you the basics," he said. "But you must always respect the rules and the weapon." Emma nodded eagerly. This promise made her feel proud and excited. She knew she had a secret mission now. A few weeks later, the base announced an open day for local families. Emma's father decided to take her along. Early on a Saturday morning, they drove through the gates, showing their IDs and weaving past rows of tanks parked neatly on concrete. Emma pressed her nose against the car window, watching soldiers in crisp uniforms march by. She felt a thrill she could not explain. They reached a large field where tents and displays lined the road. There were trucks with heavy guns mounted on them, and tables covered with medals and patches. Emma's father pointed out each display and told her what it was. Finally, they arrived at the marksmanship training area. A tall man in a green uniform stood beside a long line of firing lanes. His name tag read Colonel James Harding. Colonel Harding was a stern man with graying temples and a voice that carried authority. He wore a white cap and polished boots that shone in the sunlight. Behind him, a group of Navy SEALs prepared to demonstrate their skills. Emma could feel her heart pounding as she watched them. The SEALs moved with grace and power. They lifted rifles effortlessly, aimed with intense focus, and released rounds that hit the center of steel targets with a loud ping. Emma watched each shot, eyes following every echoing sound. She felt a surge of excitement in her chest. When the demonstration ended, a hush fell over the small crowd. Colonel Harding turned to face the audience, his arms folded. Emma stood near the front, her small hands clenched in excitement. She raised her hands so slowly that at first no one noticed. But then she asked, in a clear, brave voice, "Sir, may I try the rifle?" The colonel looked down at her. He saw an eager face, sunburned cheeks, and eyes full of hope. He let out a short laugh, not a mean laugh, but one of surprise. He bent down and asked, "How old are you, little miss?" Emma straightened up and said proudly, "I'm 8. The colonel smiled and patted her head gently. "Sweet girl, you're too young for this," he said. "This is serious training. You need years of practice." Emma's cheeks burned, but she did not back down. "I can learn," she said. "My dad will teach me safety." The colonel shook his head and stood back up. He glanced at the SEAL instructors behind him, who exchanged amused looks. "I admire your spirit," he said. "But rules are rules. Maybe when you're older." With that, he turned away and began talking to another group. Emma's heart felt heavy as she watched him walk off. The crowd around her lost interest, and soldiers returned to their duties. Emma folded her arms and looked at the ground. She felt her dream flicker like a candle in the wind. Her father knelt beside her and took her hand. He whispered, "I'm proud of you for asking. You showed courage." He squeezed her hand, and Emma managed a small smile. That night, Emma could not sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the glow in the dark. Stars on her ceiling. She thought about the firing line, the steel targets, and the colonel's laugh. She felt something growing inside her, a promise that she would prove herself. She closed her eyes and pictured herself lifting the rifle, taking aim and hitting every target dead center. Early the next morning, Emma slipped out of bed and tiptoed downstairs. In the living room stood a wooden crate filled with scraps of what her father had saved. Emma dragged the crate into the backyard and arranged the pieces on the grass. She used rope to bind two long planks together, making a crude rifle shape. She cut a notch at the end to act as a sight and wrapped cloth around the handle for grip. She stepped back and held it like a real rifle. Her chest swelled with pride. She placed 3 tin cans on an old wooden board 15 feet away. She took a deep breath and pressed the barrel carefully against her cheek, just as she had seen on the base. She squeezed her little hands around the wooden stock and imagined pulling a trigger. "Bang," she said softly, and pointed at the cans. She pretended her imaginary bullets hit the first 2 cans, and then the third, all in a neat line. She cheered and jumped up and down. In that moment, Emma felt powerful. When her father woke and saw her playing with the mock rifle, he did not scold her. Instead, he peeked through the kitchen window and saw Emma's intense focus. He stepped outside, closing the door gently. Emma froze for a moment, then lowered the wooden rifle. He smiled and said, "Show me what you've learned." The cans again and lifted the wooden stock. Then she dry-fired 3 more times, calling out bang and pointing. The grouping was perfect every time in her imagination. Her father reached down and touched her shoulder. "You have the heart," he said. "Now let's try something real." From the garage, he brought out an old .22 rifle he had kept safely, locked away. He carried it gently, as if it were a newborn baby. Emma's eyes lit up, and her breath came in quick little puffs. He laid the rifle on a table and opened the action to show it was safe. He explained each part: the stock, the barrel, the trigger, the safety. Emma listened with rapt attention. Her father explained that safety was more important than hitting any target. He taught her to always point the barrel down and to keep her finger off the trigger until she was ready to fire. Then he helped her lift the rifle and adjust her feet. She spread her legs like a little soldier and held the rifle firmly against her shoulder. The rifle felt heavy, but she gripped it with all her strength. They set up new tin cans on the wooden board. Her father handed her a single round of ammunition. Emma placed it carefully in her small palm and followed her father's instructions. She loaded the rifle, closed the bolt, and raised it slowly. She took aim at the nearest can. Her father watched her side by side, ready to help. Emma squeezed the trigger. The gun made a soft single ping as it hit the metal can. The can wobbled and fell. Emma's eyes filled with joy. She kept shooting, one shot at a time, each can falling with a neat rhythmic beat. When she was done, she looked to her father, whose face was bright with pride. He lifted her into a hug and whispered, "You did it, Emma. You showed them all." Emma hugged him back and felt the spark of her dream grow into a flame. She knew this was only the beginning of her journey. Soon she decided she would go back to the base and show Colonel Harding that an 8-year-old girl could shoot just as well as any SEAL, even better. Emma woke before dawn most mornings. The sky was still dark when she slipped from her bed and tiptoed down the hall to the back door. Her wooden rifle stood propped against the garage wall, waiting for her. She opened the door quietly and stepped onto the dewy grass. The world felt hushed, like it was holding its breath just for her. Emma settled behind her makeshift firing line and set up 3 tin cans on the old wooden board. She breathed in deep, tasting the fresh morning air, and lifted the rifle stock to her shoulder. In her mind, she squeezed the trigger and heard the soft ping of steel. Each morning, she repeated this routine, pretending that she was at the real range, not her backyard. At school, Emma kept her secret close. In class, she sat quietly, taking notes in her neat handwriting, but every free moment she could steal was spent practicing in her head. She imagined the feel of the rifle's weight, the sound of a real shot, and the thrill of watching a can wobble and fall. She never spoke of it at recess, where other children chased balls or jumped rope. Instead, she watched the swing sway, thinking of how she would steady her hands on the rifle's grip. Her father watched her every step from the window. He saw her slip outside in the morning and stay long after the sun rose. Began to leave. A kettle of hot tea and a sandwich on the small table by the garage door. Emma would finish her mock practice and then come in, cheeks pink from the cool air, to find the warm cup waiting for her. She drank slowly, listening to her father's quiet pride. He did not ask questions. He simply nodded and left the bowl by the stove for her to wash later. One morning, a neighbor came by on his way to work. Mr. Alvarez lived next door. He was a mail carrier who rose early to sort letters. He noticed the row of tin cans on Emma's board. He stopped and called out, "Morning, Emma. Practicing for a target contest?" Emma smiled but said nothing. She wiped her wooden stock with a cloth. Mr. Alvarez tipped his cap and moved on. Later, she heard him telling another neighbor, "There's a little marksman in training at number 12. I saw those cans lined up again today." Rumors of the mysterious backyard shooter began to spread. Emma's mother asked why the dogwood hedge was full of holes. Emma said it was birds or maybe hail. Her mother frowned but did not press her. The cans on the board, riddled with imaginary bullet holes, stayed a secret between Emma and her father. At school, whispers followed her down the hallway. "Did you hear about those holes in the fence?" one friend asked. Emma shrugged. "I don't know." Another child laughed. "Maybe it's a ghost shooter." Emma smiled but felt a thrill in her chest. The idea of being a ghost marksman felt powerful. At night, Emma pored over her father's old journal. He kept notes from his army days, sketches of targets, diagrams of sightlines, stories of soldiers hitting impossible shots. Emma memorized every word. She even found a glossary of shooting terms at the back and learned each one. Sight picture, trigger control, breath hold. She wrote the terms on a small pad and taped it to her bedroom wall. Each time she passed it, she read the words aloud, imagining she was at the real firing line. On weekends, her father took her to the edge of town where an old, unused shed stood. He unlocked a safe inside and pulled out a small .22 rifle. The metal felt cool under his hand. He wiped it gently with a cloth and then handed it to Emma. Her heart raced. She had only ever held a wooden replica. Now, she cradled the real thing, feeling its weight settle into her arms. Her father guided her stance, showing her how to spread her feet and lean into the stock. He taught her to keep her cheek against the stock, her dominant eye looking through. The sights. Emma listened and followed every step. She learned to close her non-dominant eye and focus on the front sight. She practiced squeezing the trigger softly, not jerking it. Each dry-fire click became a lesson in patience. She learned to breathe out and stop halfway before squeezing. She learned to treat every shot as a promise, not a force. Her father reminded her, "The shot follows the mind." Emma repeated the phrase until it felt like her own heartbeat. When she was ready, they set up metal targets at 15 yards. Her hands trembled as she loaded the first round. She closed her eye, took her breath, and squeezed. The shot rang out softly, and the tiny bullet struck the target with a crisp ping. Emma's eyes went wide, walked forward and saw a tiny dent, perfect and round. She held up her fist to her father in a silent cheer. He wrapped her in a hug and said, "That's the first of many." Word spread faster now. The old shed became known as the secret range. Neighbors whispered that a young girl was practicing. With a real rifle? Some warned her parents that it was dangerous. Others shook their heads in admiration. Emma felt the buzz of talk around her, but paid it little mind. She was too busy focusing on each shot. At school, the rumor of the ghost shooter became legend. One day, the hunting club teacher, Mr. Stevens, saw Emma watching him hang a poster for the annual small-town target contest. He asked her if she would enter. Emma felt her stomach twist. She had never fired in public. She looked away, pretending to admire the poster's bright colors. "Maybe," she said softly. Mr. Stevens narrowed his eyes. Said, "You'd better practice. That contest isn't for the faint of heart." Emma nodded and walked away, her mind racing with the challenge. That night, Emma studied by lantern light. She held her little pad of terms and recited sight picture, trigger control, follow through. She traced each word with her finger and imagined herself at the contest line. She felt a flutter in her chest. The idea of competition both excited and frightened her. Yet she knew that she could not turn back now. Her father noticed her tension. He sat beside her at the table and asked, "Are you ready for something bigger?" Emma looked up at him, uncertainty in her eyes. He smiled gently.
"Tomorrow we'll
go to the official range. You'll shoot under real conditions, with real targets and a coach watching." Emma's heart pounded. She whispered, "Will they think I'm too small?" Her father squeezed her hand. "They will see your focus and your skill. That is what matters." The next morning, Emma and her father drove through the base gates again. This time they carried the point to 2 and a few rounds of ammunition. At the marksmanship building, Emma felt her pulse quicken. The colonel's voice echoed in her memory. Rules are rules. She wondered if he would remember her. She wondered if he would laugh again. They entered a room filled with rifles lined up like soldiers at attention. A man in a blue uniform introduced himself as Master Sergeant Webb, the civilian coach for junior shooters. He checked Emma's helmet and vest, making sure they fit her small frame. He asked her name, her age, and how long she had practiced. Emma spoke clearly, describing her mock training and her backyard drills. Webb nodded, impressed by her focus and her knowledge of safety. He led her to lane 5, where electronic targets blinked with red dots. He showed her how to stand, how to grip, how to align her sights. He set the target at 20 yards. Emma loaded. Her first round with trembling fingers, she closed her eye, breathed slowly, and squeezed. The red dot blinked exactly at the bull's eye. Webb's eyes lit up. He said, "Very nice." Emma beamed, feeling the warmth of real praise for the first time. She shot 5 more times, each shot landing within the inner ring. Webb checked the groupings and nodded. "You have natural talent," he said. "But talent alone is not enough. You need discipline." Emma listened and nodded. Webb adjusted the distance to 30 yards. Emma shot again. Each hit was a little farther, from center, but still within the scoring ring. Webb encouraged her, praising her smooth follow-through. After 100 rounds, Emma's arms began to ache. She set the rifle down and wiped her forehead. Webb handed her a glass of water. Emma drank gratefully. She looked at the target and saw the pattern of holes, tight and neat. She felt a surge of pride. She was no longer the ghost shooter of the hedge. Now she was Emma Thompson, junior marksman, shooting under the coach's watchful eye. As they packed up to leave, Webb asked if she wanted to enter the local contest. Emma felt excitement flood her. She nodded eagerly. Webb smiled and said, "I'll sign you up. I think you'll do very well." Emma grinned so wide that her father laughed. On the drive home, Emma stared out the window at the fields rolling by. She held the contest flyer in her lap, imagining herself at the firing line. Surrounded by other shooters, she felt fear, but more than that, she felt hope. That night, Emma placed her new certificate on her bedroom wall. She studied the words, "Official Junior Shooter." She turned off the lamp and climbed into bed as she drifted off to sleep. She dreamed of distant targets and the satisfying ping of a perfect shot. She dreamed of proving herself not just in her backyard, but before every eye that had ever doubted her. And she knew that tomorrow her real journey would begin. Emma's 10th birthday arrived with a clear blue sky and birds singing as if they knew something special was happening. Emma woke early, excited before the sun had even climbed over the rooftops. She slipped out of bed and found her father in the kitchen making pancakes. He smiled when he saw her. "Happy birthday, champ," he said, flipping a pancake high in the air. Emma laughed and felt a warm glow in her chest. After breakfast, her father handed her a small package wrapped. In brown paper? Emma's heart raced as she carefully tore the paper away. Inside was a small video camera and a note from her father. "Show them what you can do." Emma's eyes shone. She understood immediately. Over the next hour, she and her father set up at the edge of their backyard range. Emma positioned her .22 rifle at 20 yards, loaded each round with care, took each shot with the steady focus she had practiced for years. Her father filmed every moment, her calm breathing, her finger gently squeezing the trigger, each tin can tumbling off the board in perfect order. When the tape ended, Emma's father packed away the rifle and handed her a glass of juice, climbed into the old truck, and drove back onto the base. Emma felt her pulse pounding in her ears. She hadn't seen Colonel Harding since the Open. Day 2 years ago, when he'd laughed at her request? She clutched the video camera like a precious treasure. They arrived at the marksmanship building and signed in. Emma spotted Colonel Harding's polished boots under his desk as he reviewed papers. When he looked up and saw them, his brow furrowed in surprise. "Emma Thompson," he said slowly, recognizing the young girl who had challenged him once before. "What brings you back here?" Her father stepped forward and placed the camera on his desk. "Sir, I'd like you to see what Emma can do," he said. He pressed play. The grainy footage showed Emma's tiny hands loading the rifle, her calm face as she aimed, and the cans falling in perfect sequence. Colonel Harding leaned forward. His eyes narrowed as he watched each shot land within inches of the bullseye. When the video ended, there was a long silence. Emma swallowed hard, but stood tall. Colonel Harding looked at her, his face serious. "It's very impressive," he said at last. "But video can be edited." Eyes rested on Emma. "I need to see this in person." "At the official range?" "Under my supervision." Emma felt her breath catch. This was exactly what she had hoped for. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steady. The colonel continued, "You must pass all safety inspections first. I want no mistakes. If you can't handle the rules, you can't handle the rifle." Emma nodded, remembering every lesson her father had taught her. "I understand, sir. I'll do whatever it takes." Her father arranged for a supervised session the next week. Emma spent every spare moment reviewing safety protocols in her bedroom. She recited them like prayers. Always treat the gun as loaded. Never point it at anything you don't intend to shoot. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready. Wear eye and ear protection. She cleaned her .22 rifle until the metal gleamed and the stock was smooth under her fingers. She drilled with her wooden mock-up, practicing her stance and her grip until her muscles knew the positions by heart. On the morning of the session, Emma and her father arrived at dawn. The sky was pale pink as they walked to the firing range. Colonel Harding stood at the line, arms folded, watching the sunrise. He carried a clipboard and wore a stern expression. Emma felt a flutter of nerves, but took a deep breath and stepped forward. First came the safety inspection. Colonel Harding asked her to name each part of the rifle. Emma's voice was clear as she identified barrel, chamber, bolt, magazine, safety switch, stock. Then he asked her to demonstrate safe loading and unloading. She followed each step. Point muzzle downrange. Lock open the bolt, remove the magazine, show the chamber clear, then close the bolt again. The colonel nodded but did not smile. Next. He tested her knowledge. "What do you do if you have a misfire?" Emma answered, "Keep the muzzle downrange. Wait 30 seconds, then open the action and remove the round." "Good," he said. "What about eye protection?" "Always wear my glasses and face shield," she replied. "Ear protection. Earmuffs over my ears and plugs inside." Colonel Harding scribbled notes and finally said, "You've satisfied the safety checks. Now we'll move to live firing." Emma's heart pounded as she approached the firing line. The targets were steel silhouettes set at 100 yards a challenge, even for trained adults. Colonel Harding handed her a fresh rifle with a longer barrel for accuracy. He adjusted the sights and explained the range commands carefully. Emma listened, nodded, and positioned herself. She set her feet in a wide stance, raised the rifle, and settled behind it. Her cheek rested firmly against the stock. "Load and make ready," the colonel ordered. Emma loaded a round, closed the bolt, moved her finger to the trigger, and took a deep breath. "Fire when ready." She exhaled slowly, held her breath halfway, and gently squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out loud in the quiet morning air. The steel target rang, and a red mark appeared dead center. Emma's eyes widened with delight. The colonel exhaled softly. "Pete." Emma ran through the drill again and again. Each time her groupings were tight. On the third shot, a small crowd of soldiers had gathered behind the berm, watching in silence. Emma's elbow did not wobble. Her stance did not falter. She loaded the fifth and final round. Target welcomed the bullet with a crisp ping. All 5 shots landed within a few inches of each other, a grouping unmatched by any trainee he had seen. Colonel Harding stepped forward, his face unreadable in the early light. He tapped the target. "Remarkable," he said. "You've beaten the best scorers from our SEAL shooters." Emma felt a rush of pride she had never known. She lifted her head slowly and saw the colonel's stern eyes now softened with respect. He turned to her father and said, "She's earned her place here." Then he looked at Emma and extended his hand. "Welcome, Emma Thompson. From today on, you shoot with the best." Emma shook his hand, the stock resting against her shoulder, and felt a warmth spread through her. Journey was only beginning, but she had overcome the toughest test so far. That afternoon, the base commander presented Emma with a crisp certificate, honorary marksman of the 1st Special Operations Unit. The colonel pinned a small badge on her vest. Emma stood tall, her chest swelling with pride. She had proven herself not only to Colonel Harding, but to everyone who had ever doubted a little girl's dream. Back home that evening, Emma placed the certificate on her bedroom wall next to her vocabulary pad. She smiled as she remembered the clang of the target bell and the colonel's nod of approval. She turned off her lamp and lay in bed, thinking of the next challenge, the upcoming local contest finals. She closed her eyes and drifted off, her dreams filled with steel targets, echoing pings, and the promise of a bright future at the firing range. Emma woke early on the day of the big contest. Sunlight had barely touched the fields when she slipped on her jacket and tiptoed downstairs. Her father was already in the kitchen, making oatmeal and fruit. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. Emma grinned back, her heart thumping like a drum. Today was the morning she would stand beside the best shooters in the country and show them what she could do. They drove through the base gates in near silence. Emma watched the guard towers, passed by and imagined the faces of the soldiers peering down at them. When they reached the range, a long line of trailers and tents had been set up. Signs marked the lanes. Stage 1, precision. Stage 2, distance. Stage 3, speed. Emma's hands felt cool against the rifle case she carried. Her father placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Remember what you've learned," he said softly. Emma nodded and took a deep breath. They walked to the registration tent. A tall young officer greeted Emma and handed her a badge with her name and lane number. 12. He looked surprised when he saw her age on the badge. 12? Emma smiled. 10, she corrected. His eyes widened. "Good luck," he said, handing back a small map of the range. Emma studied it, tracing each path with her finger. The first stage was at 100 yards. She knew that well, but soon she would face much tougher tests. The first stage began at 9 o'clock. Emma took her place at lane 12. Across the way stood adult competitors in full gear, adjusting their scopes and chatting quietly. Emma set up her rifle, just as Master Sergeant Webb had taught her. She checked the sights, loaded one round, and settled into her stance. The range officer called, "Load and make ready." Emma's finger found the trigger, and she drew a slow breath. When the command fire echoed, she squeezed gently. The shot rang out, and the steel target rang back. Emma's heart leapt. She repeated this 4 more times, each shot landing with tight precision. When she saw the target grouping, she knew she had scored higher than any before in Stage 1. A hush fell among the shooters. Next came Stage 2. Distance. Target stood at 300 yards, far beyond Emma's backyard drills. She walked to the new firing line, her legs trembling slightly. Her father gave her a quick nod. Emma steadied her rifle, raised her eye to the scope, and thought of all her practice. She found the front sight in the crosshairs and breathed out slowly. The first shot flew true, striking the steel plate with a crisp ping. The other rounds followed in a steady rhythm. When the fifth shot split the same tiny circle at the center, a murmur rose from the crowd. Emma unshouldered her rifle and glanced at Colonel Harding, who stood among the spectators, arms folded but eyes shining. With pride, Stage 3 tested speed and accuracy together. Targets popped up for only a second at varying distances. Emma practiced her breathing and followed the quick commands. When her turn came, she raised her rifle and loaded the first round. The buzzer sounded, and the first paper target flipped up at 50 yards. Emma's finger squeezed, and the target dropped. The next target appeared at 75 yards. She adjusted her aim and fired almost before the plate settled. Each shot rang out in perfect time, hitting steel plates at 50, 75, and 100 yards. The line officer stepped forward, checking her hits. Emma had the fastest, most accurate run any junior or adult had managed. The crowd burst into applause. By midday, the contest paused for lunch. Emma sat on a folding chair, drinking water, her rifle case open at her feet. Other shooters came by and patted her on the shoulder. "Great shooting," they said. Emma nodded shyly, feeling the weight of her success settle in her chest. Her father sat beside her and handed her a sandwich. He whispered, "You're doing amazing." Emma ate slowly, her mind replaying every shot. She felt a thrill of pride but also knew the contest was not over. The final stage began in an hour, testing the shooter's skill under pressure. Emma closed her eyes and practiced her breathing just as she had before every shot. The final stage was a mixed event. Shooters had to hit targets at 100, 200, and 400 yards in a set order, all within a strict time. Emma waited for her turn, her heart beating faster than ever. When she stepped up, the wind felt cooler, and the range seemed very quiet. She set her feet, took her stance, and loaded the first round. The buzzer sounded. Emma squeezed the trigger. The shot rang true at 100 yards. She swapped targets in a smooth motion and adjusted the scope for 200 yards. The second shot hit just inside the bullseye. Emma held her breath, moved to the 400-yard target, and aimed carefully. She pressed the trigger. With calm focus, the steel bell rang. Emma had done it. 3 perfect hits in sequence, faster than any shooter in her age group or beyond. Silence fell across the range, then the crowd erupted into cheers. Emma's cheeks burned with excitement. Colonel Harding stepped forward, leading a group of SEAL snipers and special ops instructors. They stood in a line behind her, clapping and smiling. Colonel Harding removed his cap and bowed his head slightly. "Miss Thompson," he called out, his voice ringing clear, "you have outshot every competitor today. You've proven that skill and heart know no age." Emma unshouldered her rifle and lifted her hand in a quiet wave. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she held them back, smiling instead. The range officers handed her a folded flag and a new certificate. Record holder, all stages. Journalists clustered around, snapping photos and asking questions. Emma answered softly, "I just did my best." Her father stepped forward and hugged her. "You did more than your best," he whispered. "You made history." As the sun began to lower, the base commander climbed onto a small stage and thanked all the shooters. He called Emma forward last. The colonel stood beside him, holding a large plaque. When it was Emma's turn, the commander said, "Today, we witnessed something unique. A young girl with courage and focus has beaten the records of top operators in our armed forces. Emma Thompson, we salute you." He placed the plaque in her hands. It gleamed in the late light. Emma looked at it and then out at the crowd. She felt proud and humble all at once. That evening, back at home, Emma pinned her new awards on her bedroom wall next to her old certificate from Master Sergeant Webb. She placed the video camera beside her bed. where her first practice tapes lay gathering dust. She lay down and closed her eyes, thinking of the day's events. She remembered the ping of targets, the sound of applause, and the colonel's nod of respect. She thought about tomorrow, when she would practice again and find new challenges to conquer. As she drifted to sleep, she dreamed of steel silhouettes under bright lights and the promise of more records to break. Emma knew her journey had only just begun. ChatGPT said. Emma woke the next morning with a tight smile on her face. Sunlight peeked through her curtains, and she could feel the weight of yesterday's achievements still warm in her heart. She climbed out of bed and padded quietly into the kitchen, where her father stood at the counter pouring coffee. He looked up and gave her a proud nod. "Morning, champ," he said softly. Emma nodded back, feeling both excitement and a touch of nervousness. Today was going to be different. After breakfast, Emma and her father drove to the base once more. The gate guards waved as they passed, and Emma waved back, feeling like a small celebrity. Rumors of her record-setting performance had spread fast. Soldiers in uniform nodded in greeting as she walked by. At the marksmanship building, a small but growing group of local children waited by the entrance. They held toy wooden rifles and tin cans, just like Emma had once used at home. When they saw her, their eyes lit up, and they rushed forward. Emma knelt to greet them. A little boy stepped up, clutching a bright red wooden rifle almost as big as he was. "Emma," he said, his voice low, "can you teach me how to aim?" Emma smiled and helped him adjust his grip. She showed him how to line up the sights and how to stand steady. The children watched in awe as Emma gently guided each of them through the steps. Her father watched from nearby, a soft smile on his face. Inside the building, Colonel Harding and the base commander greeted Emma. They led her into the main hall, where a small ceremony had been arranged. A table held a shiny new plaque, Emma Thompson's Youth Marksmanship Program, it read. "Colonel," Harding cleared his throat. "Emma," he began, "you have inspired many today. It is my honor to name a youth program after you, so that other young boys and girls can learn the skills you have mastered." Emma felt tears in her eyes, stepped forward, and accepted the plaque as the children outside peered through the windows, their faces full of hope. After the ceremony, Emma toured the new youth training room. Rows of small benches faced a low wall lined with wooden mock rifles and empty can targets. Master Sergeant Webb stood nearby, showing a group of children how to care for their rifles and how to respect the rules. Emma joined in, demonstrating safe loading and unloading with her own .22, unloaded and open to show it safe. She spoke in a clear voice so everyone could hear. "Always treat a gun as if it is loaded. Always point it downrange. Keep your finger off the trigger until you are ready." The children repeated each rule, wide-eyed and determined. That afternoon, Emma's father surprised her with a small gathering at home. Neighbors brought cookies and lemonade. They hung balloons on the porch and set up folding chairs in the yard. Emma's mother brought out a homemade cake shaped like a target, white frosting with 3 red rings and a tiny plastic rifle on top. Emma laughed and hugged her parents. She felt the warmth of her community around her, proud and supportive. As the sun sank low, Emma stepped up to a small wooden platform that her father had built. He handed her the first slice of cake, and she held it like a trophy. "This is for all of you," she said, her voice shy but steady. "Thank you for believing in me." The crowd cheered as she took a bite, and Emma's cheeks glowed pink. Later that evening, Emma sat at her desk, looking at her growing collection of awards and photos. A photo of her with Colonel Harding, another of her holding the plaque, and a group shot of the children at the youth room. She pressed her finger to the glass of the picture frame, remembering the thrill of each moment. She pulled out her small pad of shooting terms and read each one again. Sight picture, trigger control, follow through. She realized these words were no longer just lessons. They were promises to herself. Emma closed her notebook and set it aside. She picked up her video camera from the earlier practice and rewound to the first tape. The grainy images of her backyard drills played on the small screen, an 8-year-old girl with a wooden rifle, tin cans toppling one by one. Emma smiled at the memory. She hadn't imagined that those simple games would lead her here. Save the tape in a special box labeled Beginnings. As night fell, Emma changed into her pajamas and climbed into bed. She felt the day's events like a soft blanket around her, warm, comforting, and full of promise. She closed her eyes and dreamed not of records or awards, but of children practicing in the youth room, rifles pointed safely, eyes bright with curiosity. She dreamed of standing in front of a crowd again, but this time as a teacher rather than a student. The next morning, Emma walked into school, carrying her own mock rifle, just like the others. Her classmates greeted her with smiles and thumbs up. One friend teased, "Show us a demo, Emma." Emma laughed and said, "Maybe today." During recess, Emma led a small group to the playground. She pointed to a line of painted rocks and set up tin cans on a board she had brought. The children lined up, and Emma coached them one by one, showing them how to stand, how to breathe, and how to aim. Each time a can fell, the child who shot it cheered, and Emma clapped her heart full. That afternoon, Emma's teacher, Mrs. Carter, called her aside. She held a small certificate in her hand, Character and Leadership Award. Smiled proudly. "Emma, your kindness in teaching others and your dedication to discipline inspire us all. Congratulations." Emma blushed and accepted the award, feeling proud that her lessons had mattered both on the firing line and in the classroom. Over the next weeks, Emma balanced schoolwork, practice, and her new role in the youth program. She spent Saturdays helping Master Sergeant Webb lead training sessions at the base. She learned how to explain shooting techniques clearly and patiently. She learned that teaching was different from shooting, sometimes harder, but always rewarding. Each child she helped made her determination grow stronger. One evening, Emma's father found her in the shed, polishing her .22 rifle. He joined her and picked up his own old combat journal. He opened to a blank page and handed her a pen. "Write your story," he said. Emma looked at him, surprised. "Our story," he corrected. "About where you started, how far you've come, and where you're going." Emma smiled and began to write. Part 1, A Girl with a Wooden Rifle. Part 2, Backyard Dreams. She paused, thinking of the best words to describe her journey. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "Every good story needs a place for more to come," he said. Emma nodded and continued writing as her father watched. The shed was quiet, except for the scratch of her pen. Outside, the evening breeze carried the sound of children's laughter from the youth range, where targets rang in a steady chorus. Emma listened to the music of each ping and held her pen steady. She looked at her father and said, "I think I know what comes next." She wrote beneath the last line, Part 6, A Coach's Dream. Emma smiled and closed her notebook. She knew her story was not over. It would grow with each new student, each new record, and each act of kindness she shared. She stood and hugged her father. "Thank you," she whispered. He hugged her back and whispered, "Thank you, Emma." As Emma turned off the light and left the shed, she glanced back at the rows of wooden rifles, the tin cans on the old board, and the blank pages waiting to be filled. She knew that one small girl's dream had become a spark that would light the way for many more. And with that thought in her heart, Emma walked home under the stars, ready for whatever the future would bring.